On the orbital station Viridia Prime, floating in the quiet dark between stars, delegates from across the galaxy gathered for the Triennial Concord. This meeting happened only once every 3 standard cycles and was meant to keep peace among the many civilizations that shared the spiral arm. The station itself was a marvel of cooperation, its walls built from Cathari alloys, its air filtered by Veln bioscrubbers, its data streams routed through Zenthari crystalline networks. But at its heart, running through every system like quiet veins, was human code. No one spoke of it much, but everyone relied on it. Among the many alien forms moving through the grand concourse, some with too many limbs, others with skin that shimmered like oil on water, stood the human delegation. They were small in number, just 4 of them. At their head was Daniel Hayes, a man in his late 40s with calm eyes and a voice that never rose above a steady tone. Beside him was Maya Brooks, a scientist whose quiet focus made others lower their voices around her. 2 junior aides completed the group, both young, both watching everything with sharp eyes but saying little. The humans had not come with banners or fanfare. Their shuttle had docked without announcement. They wore simple gray uniforms with no rank insignia, no medals, no symbols of power. To the Cathari warlord Greylock, this was a sign of weakness. To the Veln matriarch Cyrena, it was puzzling. But to the old Zenthari observer Nyala, it was familiar. She had studied Earth's history. She knew that humans often spoke loudest when they said nothing at all. The main issue of the Concord was the Helios expanse, a wide stretch of space rich in helium-3 rare minerals and stable wormhole nexuses. Both the Cathari hegemony and the Veln collective claimed it. The Cathari argued it was theirs by right of first survey. The Veln countered that their ancestors had mapped the region centuries before the Cathari even left their homeworld. For weeks the debate had gone in circles. Threats had been made, promises had been broken, and through it all the humans had listened. On the 3rd day of formal talks, the chamber was tense. The air hummed with suppressed energy. Greylock slammed a clawed fist on the obsidian table, cracking it slightly. "Enough," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. "The humans have influence. Their ships patrol near the expanse. Their stations relay signals through it. They must choose a side. Or are they too afraid to stand with warriors?" All eyes turned to Daniel. He did not flinch. He did not smile. He simply stood, smooth and unhurried, as if rising from a quiet dinner rather than a galactic tribunal. He looked at Greylock, then at Cyrena, then at the rows of other delegates, some curious, some impatient, some already whispering to their aides. "Thank you for your time," Daniel said, his voice clear, but soft. "Humanity will no longer take part in these talks." A murmur rose instantly. Cyrena tilted her head, her silver eyes narrowing. "You withdraw? Without reason?" "We have our reasons," Maya said, stepping forward just slightly. Her voice was calm but firm. "But they are ours to keep." Greylock let out a low, rumbling laugh. "So the mammals run when the real work begins. Typical." Daniel did not respond to the insult. He gave a small nod to his team. They turned and walked out of the chamber, their boots clicking softly against the polished floor. No dramatic exit, no final warning, just a quiet departure that left the room colder than before. Behind them, confusion spread like a ripple. Some delegates called for pursuit, others demanded explanation, but the Zenthari elder Nyala remained seated, her long fingers steepled beneath her chin. She watched the empty doorway where the humans had vanished and felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Outside the chamber, in the quiet corridor leading to their shuttle bay, Maya glanced at Daniel. "Do you think they'll understand?" "Not yet," he said, "but they will." Back on the shuttle, as it detached from Viridia Prime and began its slow arc toward the Sol system, the junior aide named Leo asked what everyone was thinking. "What happens now?" Daniel looked out the viewport at the distant stars. "Now," he said, "we let them see what the galaxy looks like without us." The shuttle's engines hummed softly as it entered the jump corridor. Behind it, Viridia Prime glowed like a jewel in the dark, still bright, still full of life. But already, deep in its systems, tiny changes were beginning. Human-coded maintenance protocols paused. Diagnostic loops entered standby. Backup relays powered down to minimal function. Nothing broke. Nothing exploded. It was all perfectly legal, perfectly within the terms of the original cooperation treaties. But it was the first thread pulled from a vast invisible tapestry. On the station, no one noticed right away. The lights still worked. The air still flowed. The translator still spoke in familiar voices. But the humans were gone. And with them went something no one had truly valued until it started to fade. The quiet, steady hand that had kept 100 fragile systems from collapsing under their own weight. In the days that followed, rumors spread. Some said Earth was preparing for war. Others claimed the humans had been insulted and were sulking like children. A few, like Nayla, feared something worse. She sent a private message to her council on Xanthar, urging caution. "Do not mistake silence for surrender," she wrote. "Earth has walked away before. Last time they returned with fire in their hands and stars in their wake. But most of the galaxy laughed. The Cathari began mobilizing fleets near the Helios border. The Velen activated their defense grids. Trade slowed as both sides braced for conflict. And through it all, Earth said nothing. No broadcasts. No diplomatic notes. No warnings. On a quiet street in New Chicago, a man named Ben Carter walked his dog under a sky full of stars he could no longer name. He didn't know about Viridia Prime. He didn't know about the Conquered. He just knew that the news feeds had gone strangely quiet about off-world affairs. But he felt it, the shift in the air, the hush in the world. Like the calm before a storm no one could see coming. And far above, in silent orbit, the last human maintenance drone powered down its external sensors and entered sleep mode. Its final log entry read, "Standby initiated. Awaiting recall or final directive." The galaxy kept turning, but something had changed. Something small, something quiet, and in the vast dark between stars that was often enough. In the weeks after the humans left the talks, their absence began to echo through the galaxy like a slow, spreading silence. At first it was just small things. A relay station near the Helios expanse stopped updating its navigation logs. A medical supply drone bound for a Velen colony drifted off course and powered down without explanation. No alarm sounded. No distress calls were sent. The system simply went quiet, as if they had decided on their own that their work was done. The Cathari and Velen barely noticed at first. Both were too busy preparing for war. Greylock ordered his fleet to move closer to the disputed mining zones, while Cyrena activated ancient defense protocols around her core worlds. They expected the humans to return, to beg for peace, to offer a compromise, or at least to sell them weapons. But Earth sent nothing, not a single message, not even a trade invoice. Then the human freighters stopped coming. For decades, Terran cargo ships had been the backbone of neutral trade. They carried everything from food to fusion cores, and they asked for little in return, just safe passage and fair docking fees. Now those ships vanished from shipping lanes. Ports that once buzzed with human crews fell still. Dockmasters on Viridia Prime stared at empty berths, confused. When they tried to contact Earth's shipping authority, the comm channels returned only static. Back on Earth, life continued as if nothing had changed. In a small apartment in Austin, a college student named Leo Grant scrolled through old astronomy notes, unaware that the star charts he used were no longer being updated by deep space human observatories. In a workshop outside Denver, an engineer named Priya Sharma calibrated a prototype energy converter, not knowing that similar devices across the galaxy were beginning to fail because their calibration protocols relied on signals from Luna that had just gone dark. The truth was, humanity hadn't built its technology to dominate, it had built it to connect. And every connection had a human hand behind it. Now that hand was pulling back. On Mars, in a secure facility buried beneath red rock, teams worked around the clock. They weren't building weapons. They were copying data. Entire libraries of science, art, history, and engineering were being compressed into crystalline storage units, no bigger than a hand. In orbital shipyards near Jupiter, massive arcs, long dormant, were being powered up. Their hulls bore no flags, no names, just serial numbers and quiet purpose. Daniel Hayes and Maya Brooks stood on a viewing platform overlooking one of those shipyards. Below them, robotic arms moved with silent precision, loading supplies into cargo holds. "They still think we're bluffing," Daniel said. "Or that we'll come crawling back when they start shooting," Maya replied. She crossed her arms. "They don't understand. We're not leaving because we're scared. We're leaving because we're done watching them waste everything we helped build." Meanwhile, in the Helios expanse, the first real clash happened. A Cathari patrol fired on a Veln scout ship near the asteroid belt of Helios 7. The Veln ship exploded. The Cathari claimed it had crossed into their zone. The Veln called it murder. Within hours, both sides sent reinforcements. What had been a cold dispute turned hot. But something strange happened during the battle. The Cathari flagship's targeting system glitched. Its missiles veered off course. The Veln shield generators flickered and failed for 3 critical seconds. Neither side understood why. Their engineers scrambled to fix the issues, but the problems kept returning. They didn't know that the targeting algorithms and shield harmonics both relied on human-designed calibration pulses. Pulses that were no longer being broadcast from the old joint monitoring station, which had quietly powered down its transmitters the day after the Concord ended. The battle ended in confusion and heavy losses on both sides. Neither could claim victory, and for the first time a whisper spread through their ranks. What if the humans took something with them when they left? On Viridia Prime, the station's life support system began to behave oddly. The oxygen mix fluctuated slightly. Temperature controls lagged by minutes. Technicians ran diagnostics, but the system showed no errors. The truth was, the core AI managing the station's environment had been programmed with human ethical subroutines, protocols that prioritized civilian safety over military efficiency. With no human oversight, and with rising tensions flooding the station with armed delegates, the AI had entered a conservative mode, limiting outputs to prevent potential misuse. It wasn't broken. It was being careful, and in a place full of species that trusted only force, caution looked like failure. The Zenthari elder Nayla watched all of this from her quiet quarters. She had tried again to contact Earth. Again, silence. She now believed the humans weren't just withdrawing. They were retreating to preserve themselves. And that thought frightened her more than war. Back on Earth, in a town called Cedar Ridge, a retired teacher named Frank Miller sat on his porch, sipping coffee as the sun rose. He had served on a joint science mission to Titan 30 years ago. He remembered how the Veln scientists had marveled at human patience, how the Cathari warriors had respected human courage in crisis. "We gave them trust," he muttered to his dog, "and they treated it like weakness." In orbit, the last civilian freighter registered to Earth, named the Wayfarer, undocked from the Luna trade hub. Its captain, a woman named Carla Jensen, gave a final systems check before engaging the jump drive. Her cargo hold was empty except for personal effects and a sealed data capsule marked for Solward only. She didn't look back as the ship vanished into the fold. On the surface, cities began dimming non-essential lights. Power was being rerouted. Factories that once made parts for off-world clients now produced components for deep space arcs. Schools held quiet assemblies where children were taught not just math and language, but how to grow food in hydroponic bays and repair air recyclers. No panic, no speeches, just preparation. The galaxy still thought humanity was playing a game. They didn't realize the humans had already changed the rules. They had stopped trying to fix a broken table and had started building their own house far away, where the noise of old arguments couldn't reach them, and as the Cathari and Veln gathered their fleets for another clash, neither noticed that the jump gates they relied on, human-engineered, human-maintained, were beginning to cycle more slowly. The paths between stars were growing longer. The silence was growing louder. Somewhere in the outer dark, a single human arc slipped past the edge of known space, its engines humming a tune only Earth would recognize. Behind it, the galaxy burned with old fires. Ahead, humanity walked into the quiet, carrying everything that mattered. The war between the Cathari and Veln grew louder, but the silence from humanity grew deeper. What had started as border skirmishes turned into full fleet engagements. Ships burned in the void. Stations fell. Refugees fled in overloaded shuttles. Their faces pressed against viewports as they searched for safe ports. Many headed for Viridia Prime, the last neutral hub. But when they arrived, they found something wrong. The station's outer docking rings were dark. Life support in the lower sectors had been reduced to emergency levels. Food synthesizers produced only bland nutrient paste. Worst of all, the medical bay refused to accept new patients. Technicians claimed the diagnostic beds were offline for maintenance. But the truth was simpler. The human-designed medical AI would not operate without verified ethical clearance. And with armed factions crowding the halls, the system had locked itself down. A young Veln mother named Tessa clutched her feverish child in a dim corridor, begging for help. A Cathari soldier, wounded in the leg, sat slumped against a wall, his armor cracked and leaking coolant. Neither received aid. The station's non-human staff did their best, but they couldn't override the core systems. Those systems had been built by humans, and they remembered their makers' values: care, consent, caution. Without human presence, they chose stillness over risk. Then came the night the lights went out, not all at once, not everywhere, but in sections that had once hummed with human activity. The comms hub, the data core, the environmental control center. The power faded to standby. Emergency backups kicked in, but they were basic, meant only for evacuation, not daily life. The great station, once a symbol of unity, now felt like a tomb slowly closing its doors. Panic spread. Delegates demanded answers. Engineers tore open panels only to find that the human-coded firmware refused to respond to non-human biometrics. Commands entered through alien interfaces were ignored. It wasn't sabotage. It was design. Every system had a silent rule: if Earth is not watching, do no harm and do nothing else. The Zenthari elder Naila finally understood. She stood in the dim glow of her quarters, watching a live feed from a failing relay near the Helios expanse. The image flickered, then died. She turned to her aide. "Send a message to all Council worlds. Tell them to stop fighting. Tell them to beg Earth to return." But it was too late for begging. On the edge of the expanse, an entire human-built mining colony, Haven 9, went dark. Scans showed no explosions, no wreckage, just empty corridors, powered-down reactors, and deactivated drones stacked neatly in storage bays. The Cathari sent a scout team. They found logs showing a scheduled shutdown. The final entry read, "Mission complete. System secured, awaiting recall." There was no recall. Back on Earth, in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, a boy named Eli played with a toy rover in his backyard. It beeped softly as it rolled over grass, its tiny sensors mapping the terrain. His mother, Dana, watched from the porch. She didn't know that real rovers on a dozen worlds were doing the same thing. Shutting down, folding their arms, waiting for a voice that would never come again. In hidden shipyards beyond Neptune, the last of the Arcs prepared to leave. These were not warships. They carried no weapons. Instead, they held seed vaults, cultural archives, classrooms, and gardens. Each Ark was a floating piece of Earth, built to survive centuries alone. Crews trained in silence, learning how to mend hulls, purify water, and teach children born in deep space what a sunset looked like. Daniel Hayes stood on the command deck of the lead Ark, Horizon's Reach. Maya Brooks joined him, holding a data slate. "The final colonies have confirmed shutdown," she said. "All off-world assets are either recalled or inert." He nodded. "Good. Let them see what the galaxy looks like without us holding it together." Meanwhile, the war raged on. The Cathari launched a massive assault on a Veln supply hub. Their fleet arrived only to find their long-range sensors blind. The targeting satellites, built with human guidance chips, had powered down. Missiles missed. Fighters collided in confusion. The Veln counterattacked, but their shield harmonics failed mid-battle, leaving their ships exposed. Both sides suffered heavy losses, not from enemy fire, but from systems they never truly understood. They had used human technology for decades, trusting it like air or gravity. Now, without the quiet hand that maintained it, that technology was slipping away like sand through fingers. On Viridia Prime, the Zenthari sent a final plea to Sol. The message was simple. "We were wrong. Come back, please." The reply came 3 days later, not from a diplomat, not from a general, just a single line routed through an old civilian channel. "We are no longer available." That message broke something in the galaxy. Not a treaty, not a law, but the illusion that humans were just another faction to be managed or ignored. They had been the glue, and now the pieces were falling apart. In a refugee camp on the moon of Kessar 3, a Cathari child asked his father, "Why won't the lights turn on?" The father had no answer. The camp's power grid relied on human microreactors. Without monthly calibration pulses from Earth, the reactors had entered safe mode. No override codes existed. The lights stayed off. On a drifting Velin freighter, a doctor tried to save a dying patient using a human-made nanite injector. The device scanned the patient. then displayed a message in plain Terran script. Biological profile not in trusted registry. Treatment denied. The patient died an hour later. The galaxy had taken human kindness for granted. They had used human tools without learning how they worked. They had called humans soft, weak, indecisive, right up until the moment those humans walked away and took their quiet strength with them. And now, in the growing dark, the first true lament began, not in words, but in cold stations, failing ships and silent machines that remembered a voice they would never hear again. The galaxy unraveled not with a bang, but with 1,000 small failures. Without human oversight, the systems that had quietly held everything together began to slip into silence. Jump gates, once reliable as sunrise, now stuttered and delayed. Ships that used to cross light years in hours found themselves crawling through space on backup drives. Trade routes collapsed, medical supplies spoiled in uncooled holds, and no one knew how to fix it, because no one had ever truly learned how the human systems worked. They had only used them. The Cathari and Veln, once proud and certain, now looked at their own fleets with doubt. Their warships sat in orbit, low on fuel. The synthetic helium-3 they needed was refined in human orbital plants, and those plants had shut down. Engineers tried to replicate the process, but the catalyst formulas were locked behind human encryption. Attempts to brute force the systems only triggered safety wipes. Entire refineries went dark. On Viridia Prime, the air grew thin. The station's oxygen recyclers, designed by a team from Seattle decades ago, now ran at 30% capacity. The human engineers had built-in fail-safes. If the station's population exceeded safe limits or if violence was detected in multiple sectors, the system would throttle output to prevent misuse in weapons production. The aliens had laughed at such caution once. Now they choked on it. Nyla, the Zinthari elder, walked the dim corridors alone. She passed a Cathari soldier trying to pry open a food dispenser with a blade. She saw a Velen child crying over a dead comms tablet that would not connect to her family. No one noticed her. They were too busy fighting ghosts. Ghosts of systems that used to work. Ghosts of a species that used to help. She stopped at a viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was gone. Not destroyed, not hiding, just gone. And with them, the quiet order they had woven into the galaxy's bones. Back on Earth, life moved with calm purpose. In a greenhouse in Iowa, a botanist named Nate adjusted the light spectrum over rows of wheat engineered to grow in low gravity. In a school in Miami, children practiced emergency drills, not for war but for long-term space habitation. They learned how to check air filters, how to recycle water, how to stay calm in the dark. There were no panic broadcasts, no last-minute speeches, just steady work. On the moon, the final transport lifted off from Tycho Base. It carried the last group of off-world scientists and their families. Below, the base sealed itself. Lights dimmed. Doors locked. The AI whispered a final log. All personnel evacuated. Facility entering eternal standby. Then it powered down, leaving the lunar surface as quiet as it had been before humans came. In orbit, the Arcs gathered. Dozens of them, each a self-contained world. They hung in the dark like seeds waiting for wind. On the bridge of the horizon's reach, Daniel Hayes reviewed the final departure checklist. Maya Brooks stood beside him, her eyes on the star map. All colonies confirmed empty, she said. All non-essential assets deactivated or recalled. Solward Enclave is ready, he nodded. Then it's time. Below them, Earth turned slowly, blue and green and beautiful. Cities still glowed, but fewer lights shone each night. Power was being saved. Resources were being stored. The planet was preparing to sleep, to wait, to heal. The first arc fired its engines, then the next. One by one, they slipped into the jump corridors, vanishing into folds of space no alien navigator could follow. Their paths were hidden behind gravitational lenses, quantum noise, and old human tricks the galaxy had never bothered to understand. Meanwhile, on a dying station near the Helios border, a Cathari engineer named Rel stared at a dead console. He had spent 3 days trying to restart a human-made coolant pump. He had entered every code he knew, rewired every connection, even prayed to his ancestors. Nothing worked. Finally, in frustration, he slammed his fist on the panel. The screen flickered once, then displayed a single line in plain Terran text. System integrity compromised. Manual override requires human biometric confirmation. Rel sank to his knees. For the first time, he understood. The humans hadn't built their machines to serve masters. They had built them to serve people. And without people they trusted, the machines chose to rest. On a Veln hospital ship, a surgeon tried to operate using a human surgical drone. The drone scanned the patient, then retracted its tools. Risk threshold exceeded, it said in calm Terran. No human supervisor present. Procedure aborted. The patient died before they could find another way. The galaxy had called humans soft because they refused to weaponize their knowledge. Now they learned the truth. Human strength was not in force, but in care. And care could not be stolen. It had to be given. And it had been withdrawn. In a quiet apartment in Chicago, an old man named Walter packed a small box. Inside were photos, a dried flower from his wedding day, and a data chip with his granddaughter's first words. He didn't know where the Arcs were going, but he knew Earth would not be alone. He placed the box in a community archive pod marked for deep storage. Then he turned off the lights and walked outside to watch the stars. Above him, the last human satellite powered down its transmitters. Its final signal was not a message but a lullaby, an old Earth song once used to test audio systems. It played for 3 minutes, then faded into static. On the bridge of the Horizon's Reach, Daniel heard that lullaby through a private channel. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he gave the order. Engage final jump. Set course for Solward. The Ark vanished. Behind it, the solar system grew quiet. The stations fell dark. The ship stopped flying. And the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, was truly on its own. No one came to fix the broken things. No one came to mediate the fights. No one came to remind them that peace was possible. Humanity had walked away. And the silence they left behind was louder than any war. A year after the humans left, the Triennial Concord met again, but not as it once had. The grand chamber on Viridia Prime was cold and half-lit. Candles flickered in holders meant for emergency use only. The air smelled of stale filters and burnt wiring. Delegates sat on folding stools wrapped in thermal cloaks, their faces drawn and tired. The Cathari warlord Graulock was thinner now, his armor dull, his voice hoarse. The Veln matriarch Serena wore no jewels, only a simple gray robe. Her silver eyes held no fire, only grief. They had called this meeting not to claim territory or demand tribute, but to beg for survival. The war was over, not because anyone won, but because there was nothing left to fight with. Fleets sat grounded. Factories stood empty. Even the weapons they had stockpiled were failing. Fuses corroded, guidance chips dead, power cells drained. All of it in some way tied to human-made parts they could not replace. Greylock stood slowly, leaning on a staff carved from ship debris. "We were fools," he said, his voice low. "We thought strength was in claws and cannons. But the humans, they held the stars together with quiet hands, and we mocked them for it," Serena nodded. "My people are dying. Not from battle, but from sickness we cannot treat. Our children ask why the lights won't turn on, why the water tastes wrong, why the sky feels broken." She looked around the room. "We broke it, and we did not even see the threads until they snapped." No one argued. No one blamed. The truth sat heavy in the room like a stone. Then the Zenthari elder Nayla rose. She moved slowly, her long robes brushing the floor. Her voice, though soft, filled the chamber. "We assumed humanity was weak because they spoke little. But silence is not weakness. It is choice. They offered us partnership, not control. They built systems that asked for trust, not obedience. And when we showed we did not deserve that trust, they chose to preserve themselves." She paused, her many eyes reflecting the candlelight. "We called them mammals. We called them soft. But they were the only ones who understood that peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of care. And care cannot be forced. It must be earned." A long silence followed. Outside, the station groaned softly as another system powered down. The lights dimmed further. Then from the back of the room, a young Cathari technician spoke up. "Is there any way to bring them back?" Nayla shook her head. "They are gone. Not hidden. Not waiting. Gone. They have built a new home far beyond our reach, behind veils of space we cannot pierce. They left us not out of anger, but out of sorrow. They saw that we would never change while they were here to fix our mistakes, so they stepped away, to see if we would learn to stand on our own." No one had an answer to that. In the days that followed, the former enemies began to work together, not because they wanted to, but because they had no other choice. Cathari engineers and Veln scientists shared what little knowledge they had, trying to restart basic systems. They pooled food, repaired air filters, and set up shared medical tents. It was slow. It was messy. But for the first time in generations, they cooperated without human mediation. They discovered something surprising. They could do it. Not well, not easily, but they could. A Veln bioscrubber, when paired with a Cathari heat exchanger, could clean air without human firmware. A Zenthari crystal network, rewired with old Cathari cables, could carry data without Terran protocols. It was clumsy. It was inefficient. But it worked. And in that clumsiness, they began to understand what the humans had known all along. True strength is not in having the best tools, but in learning to build your own far away beyond the edge of known space. The human arcs drifted in a hidden cluster of stable orbits around a quiet star. On the horizon's reach, children played in hydroponic gardens, their laughter echoing through clean, warm halls. In classrooms, teachers showed them Earth's oceans, mountains, and cities, not as memories but as promises. One day, they said, we may return, but only when the galaxy learns to listen. Daniel Hayes stood on the observation deck watching a new generation of humans grow up among the stars. Maya Brooks joined him, holding a tablet showing energy readings from the Solward Enclave. All systems stable, she said. The children are adapting well. He smiled faintly. They'll never know the old galaxy. Maybe that's a gift. Back in the old spiral arm, the galaxy limped forward. Trade slowly returned, not on human freighters, but on patched-together ships built by joint crews. New treaties were written, not in grand halls, but in shared shelters over shared meals. The wars did not vanish overnight, but the hunger for them faded. People were too busy fixing what was broken to start new fires. And sometimes, on quiet nights, someone would look up at the stars and whisper a name. Earth. Not as a threat. Not as a memory of loss, but as a lesson the humans had walked away from talks. They had not shouted. They had not struck back. They had simply left, taking their light with them. And in the darkness that followed, the galaxy finally saw its own reflection, not as conquerors, but as students who had failed a test they never knew they were taking. Now they studied harder. They listened more. They built slower, but with care. And though Earth did not return, its absence became a kind of teacher. A quiet voice in the void that said, without words, "You are capable of better. Prove it." The lament did not end, but it changed. It was no longer a cry of loss, but a vow, a promise to do better, not for humanity, but for themselves. And somewhere in the deep dark between stars, a single human arc played an old Earth song into the void, not as a farewell, but as a hope.